This workshop is designed to assist you with preparation for your Functional Skills Maths Level 2 exam. This is a pre-recorded workshop, so any time that you would like to stop and start the recording, feel free. It also means that you can play this back as many times as you need to in order to support you further with exam preparation. So we'll get started. Just to give you a full overview of what we're going to be covering. This workshop's designed to give you a really good idea as to what to expect from your exam at Maths Level 2. So we are going to look at all of the requirements, break the exam down into the different sections. We're going to look at your online and paper-based options of actually sitting your assessment and what you can decide to do. We will be having a look at the non-calculative exam together, and I will be sharing some tips that have come directly from the awarding body and also that we know from delivery to support you even further. We'll be doing that also with the calculator-based exam as well. There'll be, many hints and tips throughout the workshop that you can make a note of and hopefully will assist you in performing as best you can in the exam itself. And then there's some invigilation guidelines towards the end that we'll go through. So to start with, watching this workshop obviously means that you're at a point of reaching out, looking at booking your test. So congratulations on completing all of your maths learning to this point. The picture on the screen shows an example of a diagnostic assessment. Hopefully this looks really familiar to you. And just so that you're aware, this forms the basis of your delivery and has done to this point. So that's the reason that we ask you to do them in the very beginning. It allows us to know your starting point, and it allows us to know which areas you require development in and which areas you're also really competent in. And then the delivery that's happened with your tutor, your assessor, has been based on that. So hopefully you're feeling ready and upskilled enough to the point of taking your test. So the Maths Level 2 exam, we run this through Highfield Qualifications, that's our awarding body, and it's split into two sections. So we have the non-calculator paper, which you would sit first. You'll sit this section first, and this takes 40 minutes in total. You are allowed to complete that sooner than 40 minutes, so that's the maximum time allowance that you are given. That's completed over 7 questions, and those 7 questions are worth 17 marks in total. So those 17 marks aren't split evenly over the 7 questions. You might find that some questions are 1, 2 or 3 marks each. Once you've done that, you will feed directly through to the calculator paper next, which is 1 hour and 50 minutes maximum time allowance. So again, you may complete this sooner if you feel that you've completed everything in enough detail. This is based across 16 questions to a total of 53 marks. So we have a total time frame there of 2 hours and 30 minutes, which sounds like an awful lot of time, but that's the maximum. As we said before, you can complete that sooner. Your pass grade here with Highfield is anything from 60 to 65%, and that is a grade boundary. It's given in that format because naturally at level 2, some tests will be more difficult than others. So there will be, that allows a variation of a low level 2 paper, a medium level 2 paper, and a high level 2 paper. So they do vary in the degree of difficulty, and their pass grades therefore need to vary accordingly. So to guarantee a pass, anything above 65%. Let's do some calculations. This is maths after all. So we think it's really important that you understand how those marks are broken down, but also the value of them. And we found that in previous learners that have sat exams, knowing and understanding the value of every single mark can make a difference to motivating you to complete questions when potentially you would have passed them by. I'll show you what I mean. So in the non-calculator paper, we have 17 marks available. If we consider that that 17 marks is 100%, so if you were to get 17 out of 17, you would score 100%. If we break that 100% down over that 17 marks, it tells us that every single mark on that non-calculated paper is worth 5.9% of your overall grade. So each mark is worth nearly 6% in this section. That's really massive. If you consider that you may have a question in front of you that's 2 marks and you think you've only completed part of it, it could encourage you just to try and complete that second part. And 6% could be your difference between a pass and a fail. In the calculator paper, we're doing exactly the same. So 53 marks on offer in total. That's our 100%. And if we break that down, each mark in this calculator section is worth 1.89%. So again, it tells us that every single mark in that calculator section is worth nearly 2% of our overall score. So not quite as much, but it's really useful information. And again, in the calculator section, if you have a question, a slightly bigger question perhaps that's worth 6 marks, and you may have only completed 4 or 5 of those steps, it could be just that push that you need to try and complete that question in full, maybe. So there are a few different options for taking your test and how you can do that. You can take your test online. So on the computer, we can do this in a face-to-face format. So depending on your location, we have a trained invigilator who can come out with you and sit face-to-face with you while you complete your exam on a computer. We can provide that computer as well, if need be. So still sitting on the computer, but we invigilate that for you. A really popular option at the moment as well is that you can complete your exam via remote invigilation. So again, you can complete your assessment on the computer, but you can do this at work or in the comfort of your own home. And this is remotely invigilated by Highfield themselves. So we book your exam for you. It's all scheduled through CT Skills. You are then contacted directly by Highfield and you are sent all of the instructions that you need to set up your computer for an online assessment. It's all done via the internet, so there's no downloading of any software, and you are given really clear guidance on your email with a link to your exam. It is really important that you don't access that link before the designated time and date of your exam though. I have put a link on here and I'd really like to demonstrate the online system that Highfield have. This is an online system that we would really like you to access. It's essential that you access it before you sit a computer-based assessment. So this allows you to practice some of the functions that are available to you in your exam itself. So your home screen looks a little bit like this. And this is where, hopefully, you'll be familiar having taken a mock exam via this format as well. So if you're considering an online assessment, your tutor hopefully has introduced you to this site already, and you've completed a mock exam via this method, these means as well. I'm just going to direct you to the tutorial section on here. So this is a website. The link is openly available to all learners. It's highfieldcore.com, and as you've seen, it is available on the workshop as a link. So you can come directly onto here at any point yourself. You can access mock exams and you can access this tutorial. If you're thinking about taking an online assessment, it is crucial that you do practice these functions before you access your test on the day. So I've entered into the tutorial section and I'm just going to choose maths. And you can see here that there are 3 different options for me to practice the test. So I can choose to look at a chart, so a table or a graph, and practice some of the functions. We'll enter into that in a little bit more detail in a second. You can choose to bring up the online calculator and practice entering numbers in there, see how that's displayed and ensure you're comfortable with it. And you can also practice the drawing function as well. So in some questions you may have to draw items to scale. You may have to draw on graph paper or isometric paper, and that will take you through how to do that. I'm going to enter into the chart section. and just scroll down a little bit further. So this gives me lots of different options, and I can select the type of chart that I'd like to practice. I'm going to select scatter. For level 2, that's probably the most relevant. It's unlikely that you would see the others at level 2. So we're practicing some of the functions of a scatter graph. And here I have on the left-hand side some data regarding ice cream sales versus temperatures. So when the temperature was 14.2 degrees, for example, my ice cream sales were £215. On the right-hand side is a template for a graph. So just a template at this stage because we need to populate that with the information that we've been given. This allows you to practice adding labels. So you can practice adding a chart title, so giving your graph a title, which is really important information to include. So I'm just going to pop ice cream sales versus temperature. And when I click add, that goes directly onto my template. So you can see that that's worked really well. I can add my x-axis. So remember your x-axis is along the bottom. So we will go for ice cream sales along the bottom, and we'll put the unit there that we know that that's being represented in pounds, and we will go for temperature up the side. Okay, so we've got all of our labels. This is really nice. It takes you through every single stage of the process so that you don't forget anything, because a really common mistake with tables, graphs and charts is that people forget to add a title or label their axes. Okay, brilliant. So when I'm on my axes, this allows me to put the values in of what I want to display along the bottom and up the side. So how I want to segment them off and progressively get bigger. So on my x-axis at the bottom, I'm going to go from 0 to 700 based on the information that I have. And that separated those figures off quite nicely. It started at 0 and my next block is 100, 200, 3. So it goes up in that. I'm going to keep that at 0 to start with on my y-axis, and I'm going to go up to 30, which covers all the data. Okay, and then I'm just going to add one set of data so you can see. So onto my data tab, and my x coordinate, let's remember, is the ice cream sales. So on the first set of data, the ice cream sales was 215, and the temperature on that particular day was 14.2. If I add that in, you can see that a dot has appeared in the relevant place on my graph. So this function, this practice tool, really does help you to practice some of these functions, to make mistakes, but know how to correct them, to get used to everything that you may need in your exam. It's not guaranteed to come up, but it's just a really good practice tool just in case. And I would definitely recommend doing that before you attempted to sit an online exam. Brilliant. Let's go back to the presentation. So that's just one option. There is another option that you can take your test on paper. This is a popular choice. Does depend on your location. We would need to send out our invigilator to your location in person, and they would bring a paper-based test with them when they came. We would send that off via recorded delivery afterwards, so it's really safe and secure. All exams are scheduled via CT Skills directly. We fully support you in your decision, and we would give you all the information in the build-up to taking your test. So whatever option suits you best, we would discuss that with you. Okay, let's look at the non-calculator section then in a little bit more detail. So these are instructions taken directly from a paper. So it tells us that we need to complete all the questions. Use black or blue ink. Obviously that is only relevant if you're completing a paper-based exam. You're not allowed any assistance to complete the answers, so you shouldn't ask the invigilator any questions regarding any of the content on the day. You're also not allowed to use a calculator. Marks are awarded for showing you're working out. That's really important, and we will come back to that in just a second. You are allowed to use a pencil, an eraser, a ruler and a protractor in the non-calculator section, if applicable. So obviously when you're drawing diagrams and charts and things like that. As we've just seen, if you're sitting that on an online version, then those tools will be available to you in your test. For the non-calculator exam then, we will have a look at one in just a second. There are some really key tips that are good to note. Questions 1 to 3 will usually be worth around 1 or 2 marks each. They will focus on math skills, so non-calculator skills linked to things like BIDMAS or BODMAS, fractions, decimals and percentages, averages, so your mean, median, mode and range. That's pretty much guaranteed to come up. Shapes, so you could be asked to calculate the missing angle of a triangle, for example, and or graphs and charts. So again, those are the things not guaranteed to come up, but we can pretty much guarantee fractions, decimals or percentages in there and averages. The next few questions, 3 to 7, will typically be scenario-based questions, so slightly different, and these will be based around some problem-solving activity. The numbers will be relatively simple to work with, so you shouldn't have a problem working with them in a non-calculator format. You will, however, need to be really confident in adding, subtracting, multiplying and dividing without a calculator. So those non-calculator methods are really important here. That may feed through into the use of fractions, decimals and percentages. So you may need to add, multiply, subtract fractions and decimals together as well as percentages. As we touched on before, showing you're working out is really, really crucial in this section. The people marking your exam will need to see what methods you've used. They've got no way of knowing if you don't write that down. So just writing the answer is not going to get you full marks. They will need a clear indication of the method, the maths method that you've gone through in order to get that answer. And in particular, if that's more than a 1-mark question, that's a good indication that you will need to show that working out to get 1 mark and get the right answer to feed through into your 2nd mark. Let's just have a quick look together then at the non-calculator paper. So this is how a paper-based version of the exam will look. Hopefully by this point you'll have seen it in a mock as well. So just to give you an overview, we're not going to concentrate too much on the questions themselves, but you can see here that questions 1 and 2 are just 1-mark questions. Quite simple in terms of their format. Feeding through to number 3, which is median and mode. Really common question. And then we get to question 4, which is our scenario-based question, our first scenario-based question. So although this is a little bit more complex and it does go into some fairly complex information about fractions, the numbers are okay to work with once you get stuck into it. And again, question 5, compound interest. Again, compound interest is an area that's pretty much guaranteed to come up. Not necessarily always in the non-calculator paper, but it will be there somewhere. Your marks are getting progressively more, so we've had 3 and 4 mark questions in this section. Another 4-mark question here. A different scenario now, so the scenario's moved on to something slightly different for your last couple of questions. But again, 4-mark questions, finishing off with a 2-mark question. So even in non-calculator, we have things like this. It does feature probability sometimes. It features fractions, percentages and decimals quite commonly. Go back to this. So focusing now on the calculator section then. Again, these instructions have been taken directly from the paper. So complete all questions. Use black or blue ink if you're completing a paper-based assessment. Again, you're not allowed any assistance to complete the answers. If you're struggling to read any of the questions, again, the examiner isn't permitted to read anything for you unless you have reasonable adjustments in place and you have been permitted a reader ahead of time. You may use a calculator in this section. As we've seen, if you're doing that assessment online, there is an online version of the calculator. Marks are awarded for showing you're working out. And you can use a pencil, eraser, ruler and protractor if applicable when drawing diagrams and charts. Again, there are the online versions of those tools available too. So from a calculator point of view then, this is where it starts to get a little bit more complex. Questions 1 to 9 will typically be skills-based questions. So there'll be a really wide variety of topics in this section, but they will be based on you using math skills. Sounds very obvious, but calculations. From questions 9 to 16, so there is some crossover there, but from questions 9 to 16, again, will be based on scenario-based questions. This is a real test of your problem-solving ability in this second half of the calculator paper. You'll be using a variety of different math skills. You are likely to find that there's lots of different maths elements within those bigger questions that you will go from, working out a percentage to maybe looking at something different. So there's lots, they're not just based on one topic of maths, these bigger questions. And typically anything from 4 to 8 marks for these questions. So it does take a lot of concentration. This is a really crucial point. You've got a calculator in this section, so please make use of it. Would be surprised at how many marks are lost because learners perform calculations on a piece of paper because they can and they feel confident, but sometimes marks can be lost because that level of accuracy sometimes can be missing. So make use of your calculator, even if it is for smaller calculations. Also, be careful with your calculator because hitting the wrong button and simple mistakes on a calculator can cost marks as well. Show all of your working out. We keep saying that over and over again. It's one of the key points that Highfield have given us as feedback directly from the awarding body. Examiners see that marks are lost over and over again because there's not enough working out that's being shown. Look at the number of marks that are available on your question. It's a really, really good indicator of the number of steps that you need to take and the level of detail that you need to include in your working out. If that's a 5-mark question, split that off into 5 different things that you need to show. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Again, this is really, really crucial feedback that's come to us directly from the awarding body, and it's a really good tip. Really easy to say, but try not to be too overwhelmed by these bigger questions in this calculator section. Take them step by step if you can. They give you an awful lot of information in one go. It's a lot to take in when you turn the page or when you click forward online, but try and take them step by step from start to finish. It is also sometimes a good idea to look at what your end point needs to be. So look at what you need as your answer and maybe try and work backwards. Sometimes that can help. So in order to get that calculation, I need to do this first, but I can't do that until I've done that, and maybe try and work that way. Interestingly, we have been told as well that marks will be awarded if you carry forward figures that you think aren't quite right. You will be awarded marks for continuing with that question and displaying good maths processes and correct calculations. So don't worry too much. If you think you may have gone wrong in the beginning and your answer might be wrong, carry on anyway, because you'd be surprised how many extra marks you can pick up by showing good maths, even if those figures are slightly out. As we've seen in the calculator section, each one of those marks could be 2%, nearly 2%. So on a 6 or 7 mark question, if you're missing 5 marks, again, that could be a real clear difference there between a pass and a fail. Rounding of numbers. So some learners really struggle to know when to round numbers or when to leave it. So do I round numbers to 1 or 2 decimal places in the beginning of the working out, or should I leave it right till the very end? There isn't a clear answer on this. As long as your rounding is logical, you will get your marks. So as long as the examiner can see what your thought process is and that rounding is correct, they will award you the marks. Before we move on to invigilation then, let's have a quick look at that calculator paper. So again, not going to concentrate on questions in depth, but we are just going to have a look at this as an overview. So earlier questions will take you through those math skills. So calculating clear percentages, 1 and 2 mark questions. A really key question in this calculator section that's common is checking your answers, so checking a calculation. So they're not looking for you to perform a calculation again in exactly the same way. They are looking for you to work backwards. So this question in particular asks, how could you check your answer to question 2? If that question 2 calculation has required you to say 10 times 2 equals 20, a check for that calculation would be 20 divided by 2 equals 10. So it's a backward check. It's flipping that calculation on its head, taking your answer and doing the opposite to what you performed originally should get you to your first number. And that's what they want to see. They want to see that you've turned it around and used the opposite of what you've done before. So as we move through, there's lots of different topics involved. Circumference of the circle, median, pretty much guaranteed. Coordinates, just a 1 mark question, so not too heavy. Some formula and big mass in there. Compound measure. Right the way through to question 9, and we hit question 10. And we get our scenario-based question. So this is where it does get more complex. They try and build that in a steady and a progressive way in this section of the paper. So we've got 5 marks on offer for this question straight away. So you can see how that's bumped up straight away from question 9 at 2 marks to question 10 at 5 marks. So this is split into 2 different sections, 2 marks for the first and 3 marks for the second. We've got some grouped frequency, 6 marks, big question. Some calculation with money. This is a really good example of a question that looks really quite complex, but actually if you break it down, you're looking at which loan option is the cheapest. So you're looking at option A, option B, option C, working them all out individually and then comparing them. So it's not quite as complex as it seems at first glance, but it is a big question. It is still worth 6 marks. There's a lot of maths that needs to be done. Moving through then to another 5 mark question, percentage increase. Really important that you're confident with that in this calculator paper. Calculating hourly rates with percentages, 6 marks. Area of a circle, 5 marks. But you can see how these skills are embedded within a problem solving question. And then finishing off with 4 and 2 mark question. So the variety in topics in the calculator section can be quite wide. There's an awful lot of maths topics that can be covered, and you can see how those present in a problem solving way. Hopefully then that's given you some really good tips for the calculator section and the non-calculator section. And then just to finish really is just to kind of mention a little bit about what might happen on the day and some invigilation guidelines to be aware of. So if you are completing an on-screen exam, particularly if you're doing this in a remote format, you will need to follow the link that's been sent directly to you by Highfield. Your tutor, your trainer assessor will go through all of those instructions with you. With every learner, you must present photographic identification on the day of your test. We may not be able to go ahead with it if you haven't got photographic identification on the day. Read all instructions given on screen or by your invigilator. That's really important so that you've got real clarity on what's going to happen. You will complete both parts of the paper. You will complete the non-calculator section first, followed by the calculator section. You are not permitted to wear smartwatches. You're not allowed to have your mobile phone. Even things like earphones and earpods are not allowed. If you have an invigilator in the room with you, they'll remind you of those things. There'll be instructions on your email that you get sent from Highfield directly if you sit in a remote assessment. But please be aware that earphones, earpods, smartwatches and mobile phones, if they are seen to be present when you're sitting your exam, that exam will be invalidated. You are not allowed to take any pre-written notes into the session with you. You are allowed blank paper. During the exam, you're not permitted to leave the room unless there is an emergency situation, in which case there is a procedure in place. As touched on before, you're not allowed to ask any questions about the content of the exam. So if there's a technical question, that's absolutely fine if our invigilator is with you in the room, or about the structure of the exam, but not about the questions themselves. They're not allowed to provide any assistance at all. If you have an invigilator with you, they will keep time, they will advise accordingly, and they will write that in a position that's clear to see, maybe on a whiteboard. Alternatively, if you sit in your assessment online, the time will be clearly visible, and you will be able to scroll through the assessment and see your time ticking down at each stage. Once your exam has been sat, results come through typically within 12 working days. There wouldn't normally be a reason why it would take any longer than that. Speak to us directly if your result is taking longer than 12 working days. Those results do come to CT Skills directly, and we will pass them forward to your trainer assessor, who in turn will pass them through to you as soon as we have them. So hopefully this workshop has given you some really good tips and given you a little bit more information about what to expect on the day. Your trainer assessor is there at every stage to support you with any further questions. And then all that's left to say really is everybody at CT Skills wishes you the best of luck for your exam, and we look forward to receiving your results.